Welcome to this video in Unreal Engine 5 covering player spawning. This is an essential feature in the game if you want your player to respawn. So what this looks like, I've already written the blueprint, so I'm just going to cover it and it will be in detail so you don't have to worry about missing anything. So if I walk around, this is what we had in the last video. But if I press 0, I go back to my player start, and if you look on the right side here, my player character went from 0 to 1, and that's just a new character spawning. So how does this work? Let's open the controller and the game mode. So if we go to the game mode, I wrote a function called respawn player, and this has a controller input, and this just takes a controller class reference, or object reference, not a class. So to make a new function, you click this plus sign. To add an input, you click this plus, and then you can type controller, and make sure that this is the controller, not AI controller, and it's an object reference. That's all that I did to make that function. So in here I have a sequence. Sequence is already covered, so I'm not going to cover it. So on controller, I'm getting the controlled pawn. So which character am I controlling, or which pawn am I controlling? If it's a drone, a car, a player, I'm checking if it is valid. If it is, destroy. And then I'm going to the second part, which is restart player. And this is just a blueprint on the game mode. So if I type restart player, there is a couple of functions: restart player at player start, and at transform. So if you want to restart player at a specific player start, you can use this function, and then the start spot needs an actor reference. So there's actually find player start, which is a function on game mode, and you can put that in the start spot. There is also another function called get all actors of class, and then you can put player start, and then you can just get the first one and then use that. Or you can find all of the actors of a class from player start, loop through each one, and make sure it is valid for the spawn you want. Is there an enemy that has line of sight to this player start? How far is it from an enemy? Is it in a safe spot or not? So you can loop through all of the player starts to spawn at a specific one. If you only have one, this will be useless because it will only find one for you. You can also get the all actors of a tag, so get all actors of class with tag, and then you can get a specific tag on the player start, and then for each one of those loop through. And this may seem redundant, but it's really useful for multiplayer games and for single player games with AI that respawn. So this is used for AI as well. And that's the reason I put controller in here and not player controller. If I right click and go to blueprint class and I go down to controller, you can see controller. Once I find it, I'm just going to type it for now. So controller has AI controller and player controller. So it can be an AI or a player that can call this function. And then it's just going to restart it, spawns it at the player start. In this case, it will find the first one and spawn it at that one. So now I'm going to go to my BP_tutorial player controller character. And this is the player controller. So on begin play, I'm just getting the game mode, I'm casting it here, and I'm setting it. Just note this won't work on the client on a multiplayer game. Game modes exist only on the server. I'm not going to be covering multiplayer stuff for the rest of the series, but I might make quick notes if you're trying to convert this series to multiplayer. So I'm just getting the game mode and setting it to variable. All I did was right click and type promote to variable, and I just renamed it to game mode. And to get this validated get here, you drag in, you make it get variable, and then you just convert to validated get. So when I press 0 on my keyboard, you can just type keyboard 0, and that should show up. Then you convert this to validated get, and if it's valid, then you just restart the player. And make sure you not restart, you respawn. And then you make sure you call the function. And then you put self in here, so you can drag off here and type self, get a reference to self, and that will respawn it for you. And this also won't work on the multiplayer on the client. You need to make a custom function that runs on server, and that will call this code on the server, so it can actually call this function on the game mode. But that's beyond this series, but that's how you do player spawning. So now you can add as many player starts as you want, and I'm not sure what Unreal Engine does specifically to find which player start to use, but if you wanted to do start tags, you can add tags here. You can also type tag at the top and add your own tag here, and this can be called AI spawn, and that only AI can spawn at this specific one if you use a different method to find a player start. So that's spawning in this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below.